Few qualities shape our psychological well-being as deeply as humility and arrogance. They affect how we respond to criticism, regulate stress, understand ourselves, and connect with other people. We often treat humility and arrogance as simple social behaviors, but they are better understood as psychological orientations, different ways of organizing identity, processing information, and responding to perceived threats. Humility functions like a flexible anchor. It creates enough stability to remain open, curious, and responsive. Arrogance functions more like a fragile fortress. It requires constant protection because even ordinary disagreement can feel threatening. These qualities should not be reduced to permanent labels. Most people can move between humility and defensiveness. The important question is which orientation we repeatedly strengthen through our habits and choices. Humility begins with honest self-appraisal. It means recognizing our strengths without exaggerating them and acknowledging our limitations without turning them into evidence of worthlessness. Humility is not passivity, submission, or low self-esteem. A humble person can be confident, assertive, and accomplished. The difference is that confidence does not require denying reality or diminishing someone else. Humility also contains a paradox. The more someone tries to display or advertise their humility, the more elusive it becomes. Genuine humility is revealed through behavior, not self-promotion. Relational humility means making room for another person's experience. It allows us to remain connected without assuming that our interpretation is the only valid one. Intellectual humility is the willingness to recognize the limits of our knowledge. It does not mean believing nothing with confidence. It means remaining willing to revise a conclusion when better evidence appears. Arrogance may appear powerful, but it often requires enormous psychological maintenance. The self must remain superior, admired, correct, or in control. Anything that challenges that image can feel like a breach in the fortress. Arrogance can appear in several forms. Individual arrogance overvalues one's own qualities. Comparative arrogance depends on ranking above others. Antagonistic arrogance actively lowers other people to protect a sense of superiority. The pattern often develops gradually. A person accepts inaccurate information, overestimates their expertise, rejects correction, and becomes increasingly invested in being right. Eventually, changing one's mind feels like losing oneself. Narcissistic traits can also take different forms. Grandiose traits are often associated with dominance, entitlement, and visible self-importance, while vulnerable traits may appear as hypersensitivity, anxiety, shame, and intense reactions to perceived rejection. The central difference is motivational. Humility is organized around accuracy, openness, and growth. Arrogance is organized around defense, self-preservation, and the need for validation. Humility can protect mental health because self-worth is not entirely dependent on status, perfection, or applause. A flexible self-concept can absorb disappointment without collapsing. It allows feedback to be treated as information rather than condemnation. Discomfort may still arise, but the person does not have to defend against every imperfect observation. Humility also supports self-forgiveness. When mistakes are accepted as part of being human, they become opportunities for correction rather than permanent verdicts about character. It can improve anger regulation because identity is less tightly fused with being correct. A person can experience disagreement without automatically interpreting it as disrespect or defeat. Humility also strengthens relationships. People tend to feel safer with someone who can listen, acknowledge mistakes, and respect perspectives beyond their own. Arrogance, by contrast, can resemble confidence from a distance. Beneath the surface, however, there may be constant monitoring. Am I still admired? Am I still winning? Does everyone recognize my importance? When identity depends on superiority, ordinary feedback can be interpreted as a survival threat. A minor correction may trigger the same defensive urgency as a serious attack. Repeated ego threats can activate the body's stress systems. Heart rate rises, muscles tense, and attention narrows. When this pattern becomes chronic, the effort of defending status can become physically and emotionally exhausting. Arrogance also gradually damages the relationships it depends upon. People may comply outwardly while withholding trust, honesty, closeness, and useful information. The brain contains systems involved in self-reflection and personal meaning. In a flexible state, these systems support perspective and learning. In a defensive state, they can become trapped in repetitive questions about appearance, reputation, comparison, criticism, and status. Learning also requires an internal error-checking process. Humility allows the mind to notice discrepancies and adjust. Arrogance pressures the mind to dismiss the signal so the person can continue feeling right. Emotional regulation acts like a thermostat. When self-worth is stable, the system can tolerate discomfort. When self-worth is fragile, even a small social challenge may produce shame, panic, contempt, or defensive anger. External validation can become a treadmill. Each achievement or compliment produces a temporary reward, but the relief quickly fades. The person must keep running to restore the same feeling of importance. In the arrogant mindset, the internal security system can also become overly sensitive. A different opinion, someone else's success, or a simple question may be interpreted as an attempt to lower the person's status. Eventually, the system designed to protect the self begins to imprison it. So much energy is devoted to watching for threats and securing admiration that curiosity, connection, and genuine satisfaction begin to disappear. Consider Marcus, a high-performing executive whose identity has become tied to professional success. When a respected colleague suggests changing his strategy, Marcus experiences the recommendation not as useful data, but as a challenge to his authority. He begins practicing a pre-response delay. Before defending himself, he waits 10 seconds. The pause gives him enough space to distinguish an actual threat from the discomfort of not being immediately affirmed. Instead of proving that he's right, Marcus asks what he may be missing. The change appears small, but it shifts the goal of the conversation from protecting status to improving the outcome. Consider Sarah, whose self-worth has become attached to online engagement. When a post underperforms, the absence of attention feels like rejection. Anxiety pushes her to check repeatedly and search for another opportunity to be noticed. Sarah begins practicing digital detachment. She silences notifications and returns to activities that are not publicly scored. Gradually, satisfaction begins to come from focus, creativity, and personal meaning rather than immediate reaction. These patterns do not develop in isolation. Modern culture repeatedly links visibility with value, attention with importance, and public success with personal worth. Praise can support development, but unrealistic or automatic praise may interfere with accurate self-understanding. When worth becomes tied to always being exceptional, ordinary difficulty can later feel intolerable. Social media makes evaluation visible and continuous. Public metrics can encourage people to treat attention as evidence of worth and silence as evidence of failure. Hustle culture extends the same pressure into professional life. People may feel required not only to do meaningful work, but to continually advertise their productivity, ambition, and relevance. Belief in effort can be motivating, but when success is treated as proof of superior character, it can encourage contempt for people whose circumstances, opportunities, or outcomes are different. Humility is more likely to grow in environments where people feel secure enough to be imperfect. Responsive relationships, mindful awareness, and a growth-oriented view of mistakes all support openness. Arrogance can emerge from very different developmental experiences. Neglect may encourage defensive self-inflation, while unrealistic praise may prevent the development of a grounded and accurate self-concept. These patterns can become deeply reinforced, but they are not necessarily permanent. Character is not a destination reached once and for all. It is an ongoing process of noticing, adjusting, and practicing. Change involves moving from fragile self-worth, which depends on intermittent approval, toward stable self-regard grounded in a realistic understanding of one's qualities, limitations, and values. Self-compassion makes humility safer. When fallibility is understood as part of the human condition, admitting a mistake no longer has to mean losing dignity. Self-distanced reflection can also reduce defensiveness. Instead of asking, "How dare they say this about me?" we can ask, "What would a thoughtful observer notice about this situation?" The validation cycle weakens when other rewards become more meaningful. Authentic connection, shared achievement, focused work, contribution, learning, and private satisfaction. When you feel defensive, ask yourself, am I treating a difference of opinion as a threat to my identity? Am I trying to understand or only trying to be validated? Ask whether you're searching for accurate information even when it contradicts your beliefs, or merely protecting the feeling of certainty. Intellectual humility does not eliminate conviction. It makes conviction accountable to reality. The choice between the quiet mind and the fragile throne is rarely made in one dramatic moment. It is made in ordinary interactions, in how we receive correction, respond to success, tolerate uncertainty, and repair mistakes. Humility is the steady confidence of knowing that imperfection does not erase worth. It allows us to lower our defenses, remain open to reality, and choose growth over the exhausting demands of ego. Character is not a fixed destination. It is an ongoing process of recalibration,